Earl Grey, thank you so much for being here. This is For the Love of Comics with special guest Earl Grey in our first ever episode in which we have a guest onto our channel. And Earl, I'll hand over to you in just a little bit.
Hello.
I did want to quickly preface this by saying I'm extremely flattered and honored to have you on my channel. And for those who do not know, although I've been saying this in many videos, I am an Earl Grey fanboy for many, many years now. And I've often called him out on being a very deep influence on me starting a YouTube channel and understanding that YouTube just doesn't have to be what I thought it was, etc., etc. So I might be a little overexcited, even more than normal in this situation, and hopefully calm down a little bit. But Milan, thank you so much for being on this channel.
I'm absolutely honored, and vice versa, because all the stuff that you said is true for me. I'm a fan of your channel from the get-go, and there are quite a few books on my shelves just because of you. And I think just thinking about Richard Sala, which there is quite a number of books, and yeah, it has been always a pleasure to watch your videos, and even a bigger pleasure to be in one of your videos. Right now.
That's fantastic, because now we can just spend talking about how great we are. But I also, I was just before we got started, I was thinking. In particular, I think I found your videos because of your Love and Rockets and Crumb videos way back in the day. And I think they might have been some of your earliest videos in some ways. Maybe I think your first video might have been a Jaime, or maybe a second video, something like that. But I found a number of Love and Rockets, and this is when a time you don't find anything about a comic series and then you find a treasure trove. It's kind of like night and day, and that made deep impression on me. Or Robert Crumb videos, and I think most famously in some ways your European comics videos, in which you talk about European science fiction. But there's also an association I have with you introducing me to Alax Sinner and to Munoz and a Torpedo, which I know that there's a new series out, but some darker and more gritty kind of European noir taking from, which is again something.
Do you mean Torpedo?
Yes, one of them. Alax Sinner was another one of them.
Oh, we have lots of dark and gritty comics over here in Europe. But I don't know what exactly, which comic do you mean?
Well, I mean, I hadn't actually heard of Torpedo at all, before I saw your video. So you were literally introducing me to the fact that these exist. And of course, there are a number of books that you have covered that are among my favorites. And so you've been on YouTube for, I think, 11 years now. It's more than 10. You'll be coming up on 11 years. And I think you've got like more than 540 videos. So that's about an average, it's almost a video a week for 11 years. So that's not just an incredible length of time, but also a certain kind of consistency and output. How have you found it? Like, how have things changed since the first day to the 550th video? Or do you think that's more or less been the same throughout these 11 years?
Oh, I still record my videos with this thing here, a Samsung S3. The other day, one of my pupils saw this thing here, and he meant this thing belongs into a museum. And I'm still pondering if I buy myself a new mobile, but I'm such a cheapskate that I think as long as it works, I do it. And I was happy enough to figure out the way I want to do it from this person point of view perspective, with just a very easy contraption, and I still use it today. Even though somebody who hears me now won't believe it, my English was even worse in the beginning, just some words. But the beauty of it is you can record it and again, and you can cut it down until I felt, okay, if somebody really is interested in that kind of stuff, he or she will watch it. Nevertheless, how crap hard crowd my accent is, and some even like it, and I don't think about this too much. But speaking about videos in a week, the thing is, to do a video is a bit of getting pregnant. I have an idea in my head. I think you have the same attitude towards this. And I'm pregnant, and it has to be delivered into the world. And no matter what language I actually. Now that I'm doing a second German channel, it's far more easy, and I even do some weeks 3 videos in a row, because I put the stuff together, and I talk for 10 or 15 minutes and to a certain subject or whatever. Usually these videos are not that long, despite if we are doing interviews with some people, then it can be 2 or 3 hours long. This is obviously far easier to speak in your mother tongue and don't look for or think about words too much, but more about the stuff that you want to say.
I mean, I know that you're very modest about your language skills, and you continue to be even in your videos and in conversations. But, the 540 videos that you've made, etc., these are because your German channel and, the collaborative live streams that you're doing now, which we'll talk about in a little bit, are a relatively new thing. But the 540 videos of a video a week is in English. So would you say that if you were making them in German, you would have had 1,500 videos by now, and because you're doing that despite whatever issues you may have?
No, probably not, because as I said, it with the pregnancy stuff, you have to have something to talk about. And but now I had 10 years without doing any German video, so there's some pressure that has built up over the years, and I don't know if I keep going with 3 videos in a row each week for a while. I don't think my German channel is of too much interest right now, but what I'm doing now is each week a very short video, around about 5 minutes, about one page, one comic page. So I did a video about the Crazy Cat, one newspaper page, and talk a bit about the stuff behind. So if you're just talking about a few panels, you can really go into the detail. And that's really what I like about it. And the other week, I'm talking about 4 pages of Love and Rockets, just 4 pages. And that's enough. And maybe I will talk about just one panel one time or something. And that's really something. Whenever I read a comic, I think, hey, this page is so great. I have to talk about this page in detail. And I don't want to blow up a video about 2 or 3 hours, which nobody will watch maybe, but just this part here. And so I hope just 5 videos or so, 4 or 5 videos into it right now, but there's no problem that I keep going on with this series each week. Really, I had this idea in mind, and I think it's a good thing. I even think I'm not so modest, but I haven't seen this kind of video too often in English anywhere.
Yeah.
So.
And do you think that that's what you mean? Like you're so much more comfortable in German that you can get to that depth and intensity of, you can talk about one panel and one page in a way that you wouldn't feel free enough or flexible enough in English?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I mean, I think that's, that's very interesting, because you're sort of talking about where the type of thing that you want to do decides what language it's going to be in. And if you're trying to go for a much more general, and I think you were talking about just before we started recording, like the artist edition Batman that you recently made a video on, and that's there we go, a much more universal and a larger kind of thing that you can talk about in English and have that for an audience. Because you brought up whether it's in English, the only thing I can think of is Strip Panel Naked, which is the series of videos that analyze, and I think there are a couple of those videos that go into just one page of mouse or one page of Southern Bastards or something like
For
that, but nothing much more than that.
Those,
Yeah.
But at least in German.
Yeah, well,
There's
I mean,
nothing like.
if there's only one in English that we can think about, but I think that's a fantastic idea. And do you think that there is, because as YouTuber, as a person who's been making videos, you've also been, whether you want it or not, you've been looking at data for 11 years. You've been looking at views and subscriptions and all the kind of information that YouTube puts up in front of us. Does it ever consciously or maybe a little bit off to the side, does that make a difference in picking what you're going to do, where you think about how many people are going to watch this, or who's going to watch this, or who's going to be interested in this? Are you guided primarily by people who are going to be very interested in this, Mazzucchelli, Artist Edition, etc., or is it more, and does that make a difference when you think about a German channel?
I have to be honest, because I would gladly would say that I'm not interested in subscribers or views or stuff like this. But sometimes it's a bit of a sport, I think. With Batman Year One, the Artist Edition, I particularly really rushed to do my video before what's his name? Near mint condition. This kind of video, it's almost game over, because everyone and his mama watched that video, and with this kind of video, it's more here. I show it, and please click, subscribe. Wonderful. So, but it's fun. I don't do any kind of advertisements on my channel. I don't generate any money. It's just a bit for my ego. It's flattering to have 8,000 whatever subscribers, and to see, even more so, to see comments floating in pretty regularly. While I have on my German channel, I have please write me a comment. Don't let me do this stuff here alone. There are a lot of people who write comments, but a lot of these videos stay uncommented for some weeks. But I know from my English channel, this was in the beginning bit similarly, because your audience grows. Yeah, but it's really not the most important thing in the world. Then it would really made no sense to start a German channel, because that's a bit tougher to come through.
Really? Oh, that's interesting, because I think there are people who think that it's easier to find a more localized audience, whatever the locality, than a more global audience. But your channel is proof in some ways of the opposite, where that's the way I always thought about it, is that maybe everybody is not talking about this comic, but if you think about everybody in the world, and you have like 5 people here, 5 people there, and you put them all together, which is something that I thought of YouTube as being, it's something that everyone in the world can see. It's like, then you'll have enough people interested for it to be, but there's always that question of, when I get that in. And have you found this to be the case, that there's because you mentioned, getting it out before a big channel does, and before that video, it's like you're the first one to take a look.
I thought my ideas behind this and my rush a bit crazy in that moment, because I haven't done it before in that fashion. But since I haven't done too many videos on Grey English in the last couple of months, because I was so busy with the German ones, I thought, hey, when I do this video, I want to make an...
Well, you also get all the people who've been waiting for a video from you, for a while in the English channel. So you've got 2 different kinds of crowds coming in there. Yeah, well planned. Well done. I found, and this is interesting, because I was wondering about this kind of stuff myself, and I wondered if it sometimes goes in the other way also. Like, for example, I had a Lone Wolf and Cub video that I had made some years ago, and people liked it, etc. And then one day I suddenly see that it has 40 views, which after 2.5 years for one day for a small channel is like it's a big deal. You're like, oh, why is that? And the next day it had 35 views. And then I realized that cartoonist Kayfabe had done like a Lone Wolf and Cub video recently, and so somehow it was being suggested or recommended alongside that. So an older video of mine suddenly started getting views because there was a
Yeah.
new video that was very popular and things like that. Have you ever found that to be the case, or does like have you ever found like
Well,
surprisingly something suddenly?
sometimes it's interesting. My I did a video about Robert Crumb, about one of his sketchbooks, and I just did it and uploaded and haven't never thought about too much. But years later, I think it really started to become a sleeper hit, getting more views and still getting views. And so I thought, hey, maybe I did something right with that video. I watched it and thought, hey, this is really, yeah. Sometimes when maybe it's with you think about your old videos maybe as well, but sometimes when I watch an old video of mine, it's really a bit cringy. Then I think this and that you could have done better. Yeah, even though every time you and we are doing our best and in with these videos, but then it's okay. It doesn't make too much sense to question yourself afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose, I mean, that I'm glad to hear that I'm not the only one, because it does feel a little bit like that. But, some people will say that that's how you know you're getting better, because if you weren't, that means you're exactly the same, blah, blah, blah. So that's one good thing about it, I suppose. But I think there's also, I don't know about you, but sometimes when I'm editing, I'm a little lazy about something, and I know that it will be better if I do this, but it's just going to take a little bit more time and I'll have to do that render again, etc. And I let it go. And I think those are the ones that hurt me the most when I look at them later, because I can never forget that it would have been better if I had just put some text on the screen alongside that, or if I'd shown a picture, instead of just talking, if I'd brought it a little closer or set the camera up differently. But because I did it, that regret lasts for so long that I sometimes think it has a paralyzing effect later, where whenever I'm doing something, I'm like, no, you've got to do it all. Anything that comes into your head, anything you imagine, you have to execute it, which then makes it slower and, longer and more laborious. So it's kind of a balancing act where you have to do some compromise, otherwise you don't get it. Would you say that as far as YouTube is concerned, getting it out is more important than getting it perfect, or are you some sort of
I think the main criteria is, would I watch this video for myself? And I mean, that's obviously the question. And sometimes I love your videos. I love your editing style. For me, it's the editing stuff. I have natural limits, because maybe it changes the world's view on German high tech. But this is my my computer,
right,
a laptop that I put on some wooden planks, because he's overheating else, and it's just not possible to edit too much with this kind of thing. And my computer before even was worse. So I'm not really a tech guy. And as you know, you sent me some help with my audio, and I really tried. Because I have this sounds
sibilance.
when it's still a problem with mats. I try to speak not directly into the micro, and sometimes all your hints and tips and all that you sent me, very nice of you. I really tried it, but afterwards I thought, hey, this takes so much time in preparation, and really, if I really want to change that, I had to get rid of my Samsung S3 and change for a better mobile. That this would be the starter to get your tools right.
Well, I mean, that's one of the issues, right? I mean, because there's either a man hours being spent in learning something and then executing it for everything, or there is money being spent in buying gear and equipment, and everyone's going to have different lines along those kind of things. I mean, for me, I think a lot of these things, like the kind of thing you're talking about, was just I wasn't very helpful because I was over enthusiastic, because I also thought I should learn things. So once I started making videos, it's that thing of watching the videos and would I watch this? And a lot of it was that, man, I wouldn't watch it if the audio was bad. The video being not so good is okay. I love when people are talking onto their phone, and even if it's a little handheld and shaky, because the audio is so clear. So for a long time, I was like, why doesn't my light look good? And why can't I get the comics to look good? Or why can't I get the colors to look good? But after a while, it was exactly that. It was, if I watch a video and the audio is bad, like within about 30 seconds or 45 seconds, I kind of don't want to listen to it anymore unless the person is extremely charming and has, a fantastic delivery or something like that. But in learning about it, it's just like a rabbit hole. It's like when you start, there is no like, oh, here is a simple solution to your problem. It's like, oh, now you have to learn the whole science behind it and understand everything. But yeah, speaking of sibilance, one of the things I did back in the days, I spent a little money on an outboard sort of piece of machinery so that I can just crank, and I like dials and stuff, and it keeps the pressure off the computer, so you don't have to process things on your computer. You kind of just do it on that. So your microphone connects to that and that connects to your computer. So, but again, then you have to buy additional pieces of machinery, you have to buy a compressor or a de-esser and things like that. But yes, especially for live streams, it's something that I enjoy, that I don't have to do any processing once I twiddle some knobs and things like that. Also, because I'm in a very, I don't know, like in my room, the audio is very bad because the air conditioner is going and the computer is an old computer and it makes a lot of noise. So for me, it's always like when I record it, it sounds much louder. When I'm recording, I don't think it's bad. That when I listen to it, it sounds so bad, all of that other noise, that I'm like, I have to learn how to fix it. Otherwise, I don't want to put it out there myself. But yeah, you're right. The amount of time that it takes, I think, which is why that consistency of bringing a video out rather than trying to get it right and taking 3-4 weeks to make like a 5-6 minute video. What is the point of that is some of those things that come up. But talking about all of this, I think the larger things that I was also curious to talk to you about, given your experience in one thing that we have is similar, I think, is as far as social media is concerned, I think both of us are just on YouTube. We're not really on other platforms, and there's no cross-platform synergy or things like that. I mean, I have an Instagram account because people told me you should have Instagram, but from maybe that limited point of view, I would be curious to know why you do it or why we do it. It's a different way of excavating. It's like, yeah, we read comics and, like, why did you start making videos, or what do you continue making videos to sort of put out there for people, whether it's in English or German? Like, what's your view on this one part of social media, which is, for us, YouTube videos or vlogs about comics?
It was just before doing my own videos, there was watching other videos by other people, especially by Comic Crack Terrence. And I found he has you and Terrence are pretty on the opposite parts of the spectrum or points of the spectrum. In his early days, he loved to do videos, putting his mobile in front of the car, driving and talking about comics and just off the cuff, if that's the right term, so and his videos were blurry and the sound was not right, but I found it fascinating, and because of the content, and I really loved his videos, and I still do, and from Sleepy Reader and Captain Strangelove and some others who are not with us on YouTube anymore. I'm hoping that they're or I'm just they're out of my focus. And Terrence especially wrote sometimes in the comment when I praised his video, the last video, hey, do your own thing. Start your video. I subscribed to your channel because even if I didn't had a video, I want to see the stuff that you're talking about in the comment. So, and this was almost, I felt a bit obliged in a very positive way. And so I put out my very first video, which is just I made photos of my comic room and assembled them in Movie Maker and did some sound to that. It was actually a slideshow of my comics, my comic collection back then.
Right.
And then I got very nice comments to this really, really crappy video. Maybe edgy, but it was really.
I mean, I've seen that video of yours, and the comment on that video is you saying, "I have a much better video. Please go and check that one. My collection has been updated, and I have learned more about video." So it's almost as if even today you're like, "Go and look at something better than this." Is your first thing over there? So it was like you were entering into a conversation with Terence. He's making videos over there, and you're commenting, and so you're making videos was almost a different form of commenting using YouTube.
And it was so easy. It was surprising easy. And this is one thing that I can to say to everyone who's watching now. Try this. Maybe not about comics, maybe about cats. You will have zillion times more viewers in a very short time if you do a channel about cats or something, or your favorite food. It's really fun and it's really rewarding. And if you don't go into these influencer trap that you're just doing this kind for, I don't know, for clicks or something like this, maybe sometimes, as I said, sometimes it's a kind of sport, but for the most part, it should be about sharing your interest, sharing your love of comics with the world. And I did it in English and not in German, which was a question that occurred from some of my friends. Why don't you do it in German? Because at the time, it was really so that most of the comics I read were American comics. I started with European comics, then drifted into the Fantagraphics stuff and Daniel Klaus and Love and Rockets and so on. Comics that almost nobody knows over here. Changed a bit maybe, but way back then I would have talked to empty rooms because I searched my audience where they are. People would be.
You have a lot of German translations of American and other European comics as well. So you were reading these mainly in English, though, like the Fantagraphics and the Drawn and Quarterly, and not in any translated editions.
Some exceptions. That's the German Love and Rockets, my very first Love and Rockets book. And this was a German translation, but it almost made this publisher going bankrupt. Was never a success. Project of the heart of it's a one man show. This publisher, he put these books out, got the license, and translated all that. Beautiful books. You can still get them on eBay, I guess, because way back then, even though they are from 1991.
Wow.
Over 30 years old, this book here, and still not every copy is sold. And it's a tough job selling comics here in Germany. Especially this kind of stuff. Then with the Terence Comic Crack, I watched videos that I understood. Maybe not every word, but the gist of it. And so with Amazon or other sellers, but in the beginning it was Amazon to be honest.
You can't escape them.
You can't. And suddenly it was so easy to get all the comics from Daniel Klaus in English, but then I tried to read the stuff and it was not that big of a deal to understand this, because you have always the pictures and the words, and so it's
comics.
Comics. Before it was really a problem to get everything from Daniel Klaus, and now it wasn't no problem at all. And then I even started to read DC, because it was around the time when they started the new 52 series, which I found fascinating, because I never had read any superhero title in my whole life. And
So you started reading American superhero comics with New 52?
Some Batman books, but Batman, you can't say if this is a superhero or not. I don't know.
Well, sure. Well, yeah, we're not going to get into those debates. I think, we'll easily classify Batman as a superhero and leave that for...
More or less, superhero started with the New 52 for me.
This thing that I remember about finding your channel was that I would listen to it because they were in English and you were talking in English, but you would show not just English editions, but also European editions and translations. And very often, like with the hardcovers of Love and Rockets that you just showed, it's like the European editions looked like they just had better production quality and better this kind of thing. So I had the opposite impression. I thought that these American comics are so popular in Europe, in Germany, in France, like that they get their own translations, they get their own editions. I mean, it's kind of interesting to hear that it's actually the other way around. And it's much, for example, in India, I think, again, because of Amazon and things like that, the import of comics in the graphic novel format, in the bound volume format, has become way more popular than single issues ever, I mean, like you would get them, but you would get them as really old copies, as if someone in the US was selling paper and people bought it by the kg, or they got shipped across the world. It wasn't part of like the daily or the monthly circulation. It was really old back issues and stuff like that. Whereas suddenly you could buy volumes. And I think for me, the thing for the superhero comics was when I realized that there were things like trade paperbacks, which weren't a thing until later. And then the trade paperbacks became easily available all over the world because they were being shipped around the world. And I think that, the fact that I could buy Astro City, a Swamp Thing, and things like that, things that people talk about, but now you can buy them in collections. I think that really changed. But I think that also expanded the audience to, the kind of audience that we have and that we talk to. Because I also think from your description, I learned the word trade waiter quite late. And I think, when looking at your YouTube description, you say, here are the videos of a German trade waiter. It was one of the first times I saw it applied. And I was like, that I guess that's what I qualify as, because there's no such thing as a single issue that I'm reading as it's being published. But it did change reading, I think.
Yeah, I looked around when I started my channel a bit more and saw really there were some German comic collectors who really collected comic books as in these floppies.
Right.
One thing that never was for me really a possibility, or even I thought about it, because these, however, superheroes weren't my thing before, as I said it, and still are not for the most part. I tried it in the meantime to get some floppies, and I'm basically, because I want to get my newest Love and Rockets issues here over.
Right, the volume 4.
Yeah, volume 4.
Yeah.
This thing here. And the only way to get these is to make a pull list. And I have a pull list by a little comic shop in Hamburg, next big city over here. And so they sent me, but my pull list shrinks down every time a bit, and there are not too much books on it. But I order some other trades or hardcovers or so with the stuff, so that postage makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, at least you have that option. Every now and then, Love and Rockets is a very good example where they become hard to find or expensive later on, and you've got to wait for a long time for them to be collected into whichever form you want them. But also, I think most recently it was with the new Hate series by Peter Bagg that's coming out, as well as the last issue of Peep Show by Joe Matt, that again, Comic Crack and Sleepy, I think they were talking about it as well. Those are things that I want, because they're so few and far between. It's not like
Yeah.
there's a regular thing. And of course, I have a lot of friends who do read that, and there are a lot of people who read digitally, and they'll say this is going really well. And of course, you mentioned people like Sleepy Reader and Comic Rack, but there's a real thrill in watching their channel, because if they're going to the local comic book store and if they have a pull list and they're getting issue number 1 or 2 of a new series, it sort of sets you up a year and a half in advance to say that, oh, okay, that sounds really interesting. I remember people talking about Brandon Graham's Rain Like Hammers in single floppy form.
Yeah.
But I had to wait for a long time, for the trade to come out and then for the trade to become available over here. But it was something that I was anticipating because so many people had talked about it and placed it on their end of year lists also. So it was something I was really looking forward to. And those were the kind of things that I wish I had some option of, like some every now and then, 1 or 2 cases, maybe in a year of getting those issues as they come out.
An interesting example, because Rain Like Hammers, I really do have that in floppies. And I built afterwards little slipcase out of wood, which is a thing that I do now and then.
Yes, I've seen you do that for a couple of other. You did that for Love and Rockets as well, I think, right?
Yeah.
Built your own little wooden slipcases.
This one here.
Look at that.
And this is for volume 2, the comic book sized series. I'm now through. I reread volume 1 of Love and Rockets recently. Actually, I finished it yesterday, issue 50. I mean, I have read all the Love and Rockets stuff, but it's so much lore and so much, and which is a reason why I think, why do you, in a bigger scheme, why do I still buy comics? Because when I'm all through all the shelves, even if I worked with some system, which I don't have, but even if I would have read every comic and then start all over again with the first one, it would be like a new comic, because memory and old brains. And so it was with volume 1, really. I had the basic storylines in my head, but so many details that have been forgotten, or maybe I've discovered them now. There are a lot of details that were lost for me reading it the first time, especially with Gilbert's craziness, which shines in the very first 50 issues to a certain degree. Sometimes it's a bit tiresome, maybe. Especially you read a story of Jaime, and which is brilliant and goes down your throat like bread and butter. It's just easy to read. And then Gilbert, 4 rows with text and characters upon characters upon characters who are somehow related to each other. And you did recently a video about how to read Love and Rockets.
Well, I tried to make an attempt at volume 1, but that was mainly talking about like which collections, because that non-chronological approach to some of the collections may. But when I started reading Love and Rockets, I started reading them like collected into the Palomar stories and collected. So starting with Maggie the Mechanic, I was actually the other way around, is that the Gilbert Hernandez stories, like they felt like literature, like at least in those big novels. Yeah, it's got huge cast of characters and they're all related and it's generations and things like that. But I had a familiarity with that kind of storytelling at least. And then with, the Prosser mechanics and race, like right at the beginning of those like half sci-fi and the monsters and things like that, I was just like, I mean, I guess it's, but later when I got the magazines and I was reading all the shorter pieces and those other things and, the robot stories and things like that, I was like, wow, this as a magazine is something completely different than you would think of if you just thought about those as those large stories. Yeah, but for me, I think once the sci-fi stuff from Jaime's stories steeped away, then I got really hooked into those characters. And I think maybe over the years, Gilbert's stories have become a little bit more out there and a little bit more hard to follow. But I really like both of them from the pacing point of view. Like they both know how to pace their stories, very different from each other, but that pacing is something so unique and the editing of the stories are so unique that sometimes I mean, you're right. There sometimes things can be a little tiresome in some ways, but it's still so unique. This where, which is what I think I was trying to do in my videos, but I don't know if I was able to, because as you know, it's an experience. And this is again thinking about YouTube. I used to think that there were channels, and YouTube channels would give information. This is when it was published, this is how old this person was, or they'll talk about something from the physical point of view. It's like, oh, this is hardcover and it has glossy pages and the printing is like this. But what was really attractive to me was that sort of reader experience thing that you're talking about. And it's very cool that you would say, well, before you were making videos, you were watching videos from people like Comic Crack and Sleepy Reader. And I found I found them in your comments, so there's this kind of this thing, but there is this true, and I think I've heard Terence and you maybe even also talk about it. There's a punk sort of aesthetic to it where, you just pick up a camera and just do it. You're not trying to be a pro influencer, the kind of thing, so I agree with you. I think, anyone who wants to do it should, because I think especially over the last 11 years, or if not longer, YouTube has become this thing where people are like, oh, apparently kids are like, I want to grow up to be a YouTuber. Like that's their number one career choice, or I don't know what age, but it's become this glamorous. And I think everyone thinks about it from that point of view of millions of views and millions of subscribers and, making money while making videos has become this kind of business sort of thing. But there is that other aspect. I think the more original view of YouTube is like people in your house pick up your phone and, which is the way I was making my first videos as well. I think my first 50 or 60 videos for my first year and a half, I was making on my phone until I got irritated with myself, to say that. But that aspect of, I think, is something that I found with comics YouTubers, where in most other cases, and I don't want to generalize, but in many other cases, you can see that people want to be a professional channel. People want to, maybe they're starting and they will learn, but they would like this to be a full-time job. They would like this to be the way they monetize various revenue streams, merchandising, affiliate links, blah, blah, blah. But most YouTube about comics still seems to be that hobbyist, punk, DIY aesthetic, something that that really attracted me to it as well, is that you're expressing your opinion as a reader and your experience to where I read this 20 years ago, or I come back and I read it again. How is it different? It's a thing that that I can see you making a video on in a way that maybe other channels or other types of channels would not really explore, because they're not on that. I don't know if that's making any sense, but
I make these videos as a kind of diary of sorts. Damien would say a vlog or something. I mean, my kids grew old through these 11 years, so I definitely have a feeling when I watch an older videos that one of my boys comes in this size and ask what I'm doing. So it's really some kind of diary of sorts for me, and a bit of a kind of a time capsule for myself. So, but I have to ask you, I got the impression some months or so ago that you wanted to change your attitude with your channel to get a bit more into the YouTube game.
Yeah, I don't know if into the YouTube game. No, well, what I did, and some viewers will know this, is I quit my job because, and that was so YouTube has always been a hobby. And even when I say, okay, I'll save up money and buy a camera, so it's not just that, but it's also the comics themselves. It's like, I'm buying this hardcover, I'm buying the slipcase edition. It's all afforded because you have your job. So after I quit my job, I didn't want to stop the YouTube channel because I don't have money for it, or I can't afford it in the same way, I should be. And if I start doing something else and I'll be starting something new, this is obviously not going to be a priority at that time. So it's not so much about like trying to make money from YouTube. I just wanted to make a little pocket that I keep doing YouTube even if it is, even if it is one video every couple of weeks or something like that, because I enjoy it so much. I didn't want it to stop because the
Okay.
reality has come crashing down. So I
Okay.
wanted to make a
Okay.
alternate reality sort of thing. So
Ah,
I think
yeah.
that's been the attempt.
Yeah, I silently hoped that you would go full on near mint condition, like
Oh, well, those guys are absolute professionals. I mean, the consistency they have, the kind of discipline they have, also the expertise. There is this thing about not just the solicitations of what's coming out, but what that context is. Why does that matter? What collection has come before it? Where have you gotten? There's a sort of archival approach to that. And I
yeah.
think they put out like 5 videos a week or 4 videos a week or something
I don't
like
know.
that.
It's crazy. I mean,
Yeah.
they deserve every success they have,
Yes, it's
obviously.
really impressive.
But
Yeah.
but I'm sure that if you do so, you have to talk about comics a lot that you maybe even haven't read, or
This is a good point,
maybe.
actually, on the opposite, because this idea, like, and maybe it's a perverse thing where because you do the videos as a hobby, you don't need to make money from it. And I completely understand, though, when you mean it's a game, though, there's a score. And no matter which game you play, whether it's sports or video game, you'd like to get a high score. You want to understand the
Win.
rules of the game, and you want to see how well can I do in this game. But am I going to change what I am and all of these things? These become existential questions. Is though, do I chase that number more than follow my heart? But the whole idea is, can you make something that you're following your heart that gets you those, like, can you learn? And that's where I think my things about editing come in. It's just like, I'm going to say what I'm going to say. But if by editing, I keep someone's attention longer, then the algorithm will show it to 5 more people. That means maybe 1 more person will find the channel. All of that stuff has an accumulative effect. So for me, it's always like trying to score against myself. Like if 1 year ago, my videos were doing this, so it's not comparing to other people's videos, but like what is different from this video to so I think in YouTube, they have this thing called the retention, and you can see when people drop off your video.
Yeah.
And I'm always fascinated by that graph. I want to know, where did they get really bored, or where did they scan forward? Because I always see that there are little blips, and you're like, oh, when you show the picture, so there are people who are scanning the video to when you're next showing the comic. They don't want to see your stupid face. They want to see the comic. So you can see these things. And I think those things are kind of interesting. But if you're saying I'm independent and I don't care and I'm going to make my own types of videos, I think you're automatically going to know that YouTube isn't going to be a money-making thing in any way. I mean, it's not even for people who do it regularly. And if you're following a trend, then you've got to know every comic that's being released. You've got to know which movies are coming out. You've got to know what is going to be the searchable term. And that just that's not the reason why you started doing it. So I think that part of it, I think, is always going to be a little difficult. It's not, although, again, as I say, maybe that's just a perverse way of, but like you were saying, the comics you haven't read. Like there was a time when I was doing haul videos, like here is, and like I'd done 1 or 2, but I never wanted to do them. But then I did them and I didn't feel good because I hadn't read them, I'm just opening and saying, I have ordered this. And so I felt like I'm just talking about buying and accumulating instead of the story. I don't know. Have you ever felt that way, or do you have guidelines in your head for what kind of videos you'll make, or what will be the topic of the? Do you have any political stances or philosophical stances that you make sure your videos have to adhere to?
Yeah, I don't know about philosophy, but I hear you about the whole thing that feeling bad about showing too many comics in a too short time frame, so that you're just, I bought this, I bought that, and I also bought that. On the other hand, it's a surefire hit. I mean,
It is a surefire
playing the YouTube game, yeah. And on the other hand, I skipped these kind of videos for a while, but then I figured, because I myself I am the one there are some YouTubers who are very long-winded comments about each and every book, which is totally fine. But
I'm not going to take this personally.
I don't want to follow every sentence. So, and I can come to my own opinion. Just show me some pages. Okay, next book. Show me some pages. So not with your videos, which I really do from start to finish, but on some other videos, these little peaks could be part-wise because of me. Yeah, and I do like watching videos where it's just here, this book is, and that book, but with some opinions about it, some words, some assessments to the book. When it's just, this is great, and nobody tells me why or whatever, and that is great. The story is great. The art is great. I mean, art could be great out of many reasons. I mean, John Porcellino, one artist that I've influenced you to a bit. For 99.9% of the population, this is not good art. So it's, when you just divide it in good and bad art. So you have to really convince one or to tell what it's great. I mean, Alex Ross art, which I found most of the time quite boring, this kind of art, which is perfect, but stiff, to generalize a lot now. To generalize, to overgeneralize. But some art is just so perfect, so shiny, and so that you may don't have to say something about it, but I think you have to explain what is great, and maybe why photoreferential art is sometimes not the best art in the world. I mean, I have a constant beef about comics drawn by Andrea Sorrentino, because especially recently he just uses photos and does some filters over it, and I constantly scream at my monitor when some guy shows a new comic by Andrea Sorrentino. Great art! And why? That's not great art. Yeah. So,
well, I mean, I think your point is that at least tell me why you gets great art. You know, like the expression that you're talking about is, I completely agree with you, because the reader is the reason I'm watching the video. Otherwise, I can look at photos online, and this is a thing that I've wondered about, because comics as a medium, that we love, I think, take for granted that everybody understands comics the way that we understand comics as being a separate medium. But a lot of people do approach it as art first and foremost, and writing is secondary, or writing is most important, and art, and even they use the word story to mean writing. Whereas I always think that story is the art and the writing put together, all of it together, the way that storytelling has volume and inflection. So I think when we think about what is beautiful or what is great, we want to talk about why is it a beautiful comic, not, I mean, by using the elements, but discussing all of the elements together. And I think you're absolutely right. When I watch videos and where people just show something and say, this is beautiful, I feel, since it's a video, if you just have a good camera and good lighting, I can see that it is beautiful, or I can decide for myself, what am I listening to? But I think, again, it's not necessarily the way everybody watches YouTube, or the reason everybody watches YouTube, which is why I'm so interested in someone who's been doing things for 11 years in a particular way. Because as I said, when I found your channel, what I really appreciated was you talking about it as if it is objective and subjective at the same time, so when you say this is fascinating,
my opinion is the only really opinion that matters. So objective and subjective,
it comes together, right? But there is but I mean, you're kind of joking, but there is a talent in that, in how to make something sound objective but be understood to be subjective. Obviously, if I say this is a terrifically suspenseful story, it's not a given that everyone will feel suspense when they read it. It's just I'm talking about it, but I want to talk about why I felt or what about it made it that way. Or I think what happens with channels like yours is I start to trust you. So I don't have to agree with you on everything.
Yeah.
I just like to hear your opinion on something. And that's what this kind of video making, I think, may be more about, rather than be about the fact. Not to say that any of those other kinds of videos are bad or wrong, but I think it's a different type of video making. I think it's a different type of YouTube in that way. It's not about providing information. It's not about providing facts and numbers and data, which people will then go out. It's like, that's important that this is what is out and this is what it looks like and this is what it feels like. But that's that's all there is to it. It's putting something in front of people that they haven't seen before. But more and more, I think it's not just enough to say you haven't seen it before, or wouldn't it be nice if you could, that's the part I always feel worried about, is like, when does it stop being sharing and when does it become showing off? Because you realize that after a point of time, someone's going to say, oh, that costs, $50. That's a lot of money to spend behind a book. And now you have 3 of them. Or, someone is going to be like, that is so beautiful, but I don't own it. And I'm probably never going to own it because I'm not going to spend $50 on it. So I'd much rather watch someone on YouTube. So there is a value in that living vicariously, like through somebody else's purchase, you are kind of getting a view. But do you worry about it as being showing off, or like, oh, look at what I have and look at how much I have, or look at how rare this thing is, or something like that? Or does that not come into the picture? Kind of videos?
As I said it before about the new Batman Year One Artist Edition, that it was in my head. Now you're showing off.
It's a little bit of a flex.
Yeah, it's a bit embarrassing, but hey, I'm in this thing here and I do this nevertheless. And I'm doing now regularly these haul videos once in a month in German. And because these books that I order from this comic shop in Hamburg, they arrive once a month. So I thought, hey, I open this box and record it and put all the other books on the table that I've bought in the last month. So it's a bit, for myself. I don't write lists down. I don't. So I'm very bad when I've bought something. You can't ask me the other day what was the price on this. Not because I have so much money, but just I'm bad with money. So ask my wife about it. And I have the illusion for months now, for maybe even a year, that all my shelves are full. And as I said, I don't need more comics, actually. Yeah, it's just I have to sell the same amount of books that I buy. So I'm telling really everybody, and I don't lie. I'm really thinking that I'm honest. Lots of books I know, but I sell exactly the same amount that I buy. So but now when I watch these monthly,
and this is all the time, like every month you're selling as well as buying.
It's. Let's say it's a plan.
Right. Okay.
I really try to, but I mean, the shelves are full. That's probably the same situation like in your room when I look behind you and you.
Yeah, there's some gap between the top of and the ceiling. I can still fit some few things in there, I guess.
The thing with books to the ceiling is the bottom of this room here is. It's an old house. And I think you can do too much weight on, and I don't want to crash with all the stuff.
Well, it's too late now.
I set some limitations, so I said not another shelf, even if there is a bit a space between the ceiling and the shelf.
Okay.
Yeah, and these monthly haul videos, I really thought it doesn't make sense. Hey, next month you don't have so much books. And what happens next month? I have almost exactly the obscene amount of comics on the table like in the month before. So
Well,
it's
I
an
mean, are you
addiction, what
really
they.
surprised? I mean, you thought that you were going to do this as a now you will have to do it because you have a video commitment. Now you have a video series that people watch and follow. So you will have to have a haul every month so that
No,
you
no,
can
no.
make that video.
No. That's really not the case. Especially, I have so many comics, especially in German, that I have never talked about before. Hey, I can do a series about Love and Rockets from the start. I don't, without repeating myself, but I still have the feeling that this is an important comic, and more people have to read the comic.
So you mentioned like selling, for example. Is this in Germany or all across Europe, or you're selling internationally? Is it easy for you to sell comics? Because for me, it's very difficult, and I don't even explore it. I explored it a couple of times, and it's just so, I don't know if this is absolutely true, but I also like to keep my collection. Like, I like to think that it's a very finessed collection. I think for ages before I buy anything. So it's less likely that I'll want to get rid of something. I mean, it does happen every now and then. But for the most, I consider like, oh, it's all essentials. But the problem is there are more essentials out there that I have not yet got. And there are new essentials that are being published. So even if you are a very fine curator, it will still have to continue to be expanded. But you find it, I mean, you have the infrastructure and the systems that allow for eBay or Amazon marketplaces, things like that. eBay.
It's pretty easy to sell all over Europe. The German comics, obviously, I only choose in German or in Austria, Switzerland, and so on in this small region. But when I sell the stuff Europe wide, then it's possible, then to sell. I have a good feeling what can be sold and what can't be sold so easily. For instance, I had tried out mangas a lot, and it's really a tryout. I tend to be fascinated in the beginning, and sometimes I'm stuck in the middle. For an example, there was the samurai comic. Anyhow, it's no problem to sell manga over here. That's
especially if you have got some nice deluxe editions, etc.
The more deluxe, the easier the stuff goes away, and even for a double cover price or so. I'm not ashamed a bit ashamed to say, but sometimes, but I think, hey, when you
I mean, it's an auction. I mean, on eBay, are you usually auctioning things, and then the auction finds its own price?
I don't auction the stuff away because then you will sell under price usually.
I see.
I put the stuff. I don't know how it's in India, but here it's so that you really have to have patience. Right. The comics, sometimes it's strange. I put them out up for whatever price and think, hey, it's a good deal, but they sell after 3 years or so. And so it's not so that I put them on eBay and the next day they're gone sometimes, but then I think, hey, you charged to the price you wanted was
too little,
too slow, too low. But yeah, it's a good question. I don't have so many books that I really want to let go and that I can sell. I had some weeks ago, I thought, I looked at my shelf with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which was something I've never thought that I really love as much as I did in the end. It was clear to me that I will keep the Eastman and Laird, the original black and white ones, but then the IDW ones, I hardly doubted that. I doubted very much that I really would read the whole stuff again and again. So I put them out of the shelf, and under the lights to make my photos for eBay. The only mistake that I did was to open the book up. And then I started reading again and laughing and giggling and liking the whole stuff. And then I put it right there again on the shelf.
That sounds like a kind of common problem that people would normally have in being able to sell. How about the other way around? Do you often double dip or pick up things that you already have because it's a good price or because it's a bargain or someone's selling it for like $1 or something like that, and you think it's a masterpiece and it's a hardcover or something? Like, do you, because I usually think of you as a very sensible, person. So when I think about all the foolishness that I do, and I'm like, Earl Grey, Milan would never do that. Would you give in to such kind of silliness as having multiple copies of the same comic or the same edition?
Have you ever watched my video with my Killing Joke collection?
Oh, right. Okay, so there is at least one in which you do have several kind of but you've got a logic system. Why? Because each edition has something different.
I can give you reasons for the craziest kind of stuff. You're looking a bit here. This is a good example for double dipping, and I couldn't help myself. I had to get these books from Thorgal, and these are French editions with the black and white art. And so and they're just beautiful. And I have the Thorgal German albums. It would be absolutely not necessary at all to have. I mean, I have Comanche, Jeremiah, Blake and Mortimer in similar black and white editions.
Wow.
These are some of the most beautiful books in my collection. These are just really gorgeous. So double dipping. Some books like these occur somewhere. I'm just helpless. I'm a victim.
Right. But I mean, I think, semantically speaking, some of these can be considered upgrades. Like if you have something in paperback and you get a nice oversized hardcover, it's a double dip, but you could technically sell off that other edition, and just keep the upgrade. And that's one thing. And then the double dip is, I think, more like, well, even if you have these gorgeous black and white editions, you're still going to hold on to the color German editions that you have, they kind of work in parallel, which is the way it happens with me with things, especially when you have the black and white editions. I almost think that they shouldn't count as double dip. I'm like, it's a different book.
I have another example here, probably a series that you never heard before.
No.
It's a European comic, André Taimant, crime comics. And the reason why I pulled these out is I had the softcover albums before. So, and then I heard about this series here being, or I saw these actually. And when you put them on your shelf, they look like this. And again, Milan, Earl, the helpless victim. But I sold my softcover albums, and for the same money that I paid for these books. So
was that because these books you got at a good price, or because the softcover albums for some reason are
maybe wait. Almost. It was a bit.
Okay. Yeah. I mean. But when it comes to things like selling paperbacks for hardcovers, I think 10-15% should be the tolerance range.
Yeah. But there would have been no reason to keep the softcover albums for me, because these comics are in color as well. The softcover albums, same language, same everything, but just a nicer production values and essay in the beginning, all the stuff that you want. And
I think there's a lot of deluxe reprints, editions, etc. coming out at all times, and a lot of times these get names like collector's edition or collector's series, etc. What's your view on this whole collector's item aspect of things? Because of course we love the production, but sometimes I wonder, is that the plan to sell the same people who already have it another thing because they're the fans of it? And so does a collector's item mean that it's in some way exploiting the fans you already have, or is there another aspect of it which is like, because as we can identify what's going to resale at a good value.
Yeah.
Like you kind of develop an instinct for it after a while, so you're just like, it doesn't even matter if it's good. The fact that it is going to be a limited run, and the fact that it's hardcover, and the fact that it's the first time it's coming out in 30 years and they'll probably not do it again, means it will have a good resale price. So there's a lot of speculation and a lot of people who get into, even if they don't do it intentionally, I've seen so many people say things like, oh, it's still on my shelves wrapped in plastic, or I see people selling things that are still in their original wrapping. Very often you'll see people comment saying that I've got this, I've had it for many years and I've never read it. Like, do you think that somewhere this aspect is also there, where people are all about the collecting and the buying and then one day selling and enjoying that story more than the story that's inside the book?
I mean, whatever they make them happy, I think it's okay. I mean, I can't really understand it, and I feel it always a bit when I get an old book, an old album or old comic, and I open it up, and it's clear that this book has never been opened before, because it's just, you are the first one. I mean, a bit, I'm excited, but the main emotion that I feel in that moment is that I feel sorry for the book and the one who has this book before, because it's like toys that were never been played with.
Yeah.
I mean, they get the most amount of bucks on eBay or whatever,
Sure.
but it's a bit a sad affair. I really think so.
Yeah,
I really love when sometimes someone has done some marks with some pencil, or I had a comic that was painted with some color pencils. It was a black and white comic, but one page was excellent. This is really making this book special and more worth it.
I've had somewhat similar experiences where I've been able to buy ex-library copies. And so for a while, a lot of used books from the US were available in India through, they're not anymore, but sometimes they'll turn up. But for a while, there were a lot of the same things that would be there in Amazon US for 99 cents, you could pick up for about $2 or $3 in India. And many of them were library copies. And, one of my first Richard Sala, in fact, the Delphine book that started it all, was an ex-library copy, and they had stickers. And I would remove the stickers, but what felt interesting sometimes was that you would see that no one had ever checked it out, because sometimes you would have that little thing in there that's been cancelled and it never got checked out of the library. And somewhere I would feel sad about it, and somewhere I would think, well, if people were checking it out, then they wouldn't have gotten rid of it, and then you wouldn't have been able to buy it for 99 cents. Yeah. So it's kind of all connected in that way. But sometimes I think about this when I want to make a video on something that is a little fancier and something that's a little nicer, where I'm like, of course this is going to be appealing, but do I have anything more to say about the fact that it's fancy and cool? And am I contributing to this kind of, the FOMO, or, oh, that's so beautiful, I must have it because I saw it in a video, as opposed to, and of course, the whole point of something like an artist edition, etc., the ones that I think of, the nice box sets, the whole point of them is to celebrate the story, but I always feel that balance of like, oh, I should maybe, talk about what makes this a great comic before I start talking about the production of it. Or otherwise, I would make almost like a portfolio of videos. If I want to talk about this box set, I can't start with that. I have to start with a introduction to that, and then talk a little bit about some other stuff. And then I will talk about the artist edition, because now I have talked about the series in a different video. I can make a reference. I don't know if you ever feel, because it's the same kind of idea of that showing off and all that stuff. But when I see this other sort of part of it, where people, it's because they are beautiful objects, but to keep them only as objects, I'm like, am I contributing to that? Am I, because sometimes people will link your video to show somebody else how fancy it is. And then you're like,
but
I don't know.
It's comics are depending on the way they are reproduced. much more than prose books. So sometimes the reason to get a comic is the way it is presented. For me, it's if maybe if this book wouldn't have this fantastic cover that it has, I've never checked this book out. And if this would be comic book size and bad reproduction all over, I probably would never had read Love and Rockets. Or a more recent example, I bought The Bone, a Bone collection in hardcover, slipcase. And really the reason why I checked a video about this book out, and now I read Bone because I saw this hardcover deluxe thing, and I knew there's not a big deal. If I don't like Bone, I could sell this easily for cover price, because it was really very cheap, and I won't sell it because I really love Bone, like you do, obviously.
Yes.
And this was actually some kind of influencing after the fact by yours truly, by For the Love, by Anschumann. Because really, I remembered he was crazy about Bone, and then you have this beautiful book here, and so on. Probably if there wouldn't be this hardcover set, I with all my things against Bone, because it looks like this comic, it looks like that. It is a bit of a mishmash of several comics that I do love as well. So I thought, hey, not Bone, it's maybe too much in that section, but it's a great comic. It's a great comic, and I really do like it. And the other recent example, are these Ginseng Roots by Craig Thompson.
Right. I saw your video in which you had that box set of all of the facsimile issues.
I really love the way this is printed. The paper is superb, and it would really be totally different experience when it was printed on other paper. And the whole slipcase, comic books in a slipcase thing here, that you can't. It's impossible to not love this kind of thing. Even it's just great, and so it's inseparable from story and the art. I think really the third factor there is the way it is done, the production values. It's not always the case. I mean, some Batman comics you can read, or other comics work well in different ways, of course.
I think there's a thing that I think about it, and the one thing that I found to compare it to is board games. So my wife and I really like board games, and I know that in Germany board games are a big thing, and Essen, is a worldwide kind of thing. But like with board games, there is an instant allure of certain games where it just looks beautiful, and the pieces are so nice and solid, and the cards are just the right kind of thing, and then the gameplay can be, it's okay, but you just have fun because of all the tactile things, and it's pretty. And at the same time, there can be other things that are kind of boring in spite of how beautiful it looks. And then there are certain other things that it doesn't matter that it's a little more flimsy, the game mechanics and the engine of it. Like you wish for an upgrade version, but first and foremost is that. And this is something I've wondered about, because, I've seen this with hardcovers and trade paperbacks. When I started reading comics, I used to read in trade paperbacks, and that was what I could afford, and that was what was available. And they weren't, I don't know, maybe the prices seem to have gone up for everything now that I've quit my job. That automatically makes everything more significant. But I used to read so many trades, and I would love reading the trades and getting the next trade and all of that stuff. And then I've seen that people don't want to buy trades of a great series of something that is fantastic, because they'd rather wait for a deluxe edition. And if the deluxe edition doesn't come, that's okay. They'll buy the deluxe edition of something else. But I always think, but what about this story? What about this great story that you're not reading right now? So I always have that worry that while the physical thing is such a, it's absolutely connected, you cannot separate it. to put that first and to make that the sort of reason behind it, is that a
Yeah.
thing that will automatically happen to everyone, or especially when we think about things like collectors? Because I always enjoy the fact that there's so much paperback and so much used copies in my
Yeah.
collection that sometimes I feel disingenuous representing it as all shiny absolute editions and things like that. Whereas that stuff came after the love. It's like I read Sandman in the old trade paperbacks, which were
Yeah.
sometimes bought used. And then because I like Sandman, I bought the absolute edition. But even till today, I've probably reread the trade paperbacks more often than the absolute edition, but the absolute edition gets the nice spot in the living room, whereas the trade paperbacks so I always wonder about, like, am I putting the cart before the horse? Because originally it was the trade paperback, and as much as I will say, yeah, the recoloring or the size and the nice paper is good, it didn't interfere. The trade paperback or even the yellowed trade paperback didn't interfere with enjoying the story when you first read it. So I don't know if there's a point to this. I was just like the way I approach it from the.
Yeah, I hear you absolutely. For instance, my Asterix and Lucky Luke's, and so I will never trade. A lot of these albums are loose stacks of paper right now, but there's so much history to them that I really want to read them in this way, and some memory of way back then when maybe my sons tore them in excitement or something like this. And we had a recent discussion between the German tubers, and we had the subject of our favorite comic format. Which format is the best for us? So, and my answer to that was there's no the best format. Sometimes
you took the cheating answer.
Yeah, maybe a bit cheating, but really, example for newspaper strips. This
Beautiful.
Yeah, probably one thing that you've shown in one of your videos, and
This was in my very first live stream. This is like the first time I tried a live stream many years ago. I was talking about these Library of American Comics. It's just a fantastic format.
The best format for this kind of comic, but and sometimes these cheap comic book formats are the best. Another example, you can edit it out, and
no, this is all gold.
One of the best books actually in my collection, or some of the best, are these showcase floppies.
Yeah.
I mean, they're printed almost on toilet paper.
Yes, and they've got that rough newsprint, black and white printing.
Yeah, exactly. And but they are the perfect thing for horror comics and similar stuff like this. And because I thought, hey, this somehow the cover here is an insult to the content in a way. I really love to read these, and you can take them wherever you want without. They're very solid and all the stuff. But then I built.
But you made your own
for this thing here with the art and all that. So. It bugged me a bit that these books here are so beautiful on the inside and, let's face it, ugly on the outside.
Some of those covers, they've used like more modern art than what is inside, which I thought was a very odd choice. But I think there are some others where they use like contemporary artwork, and I think they look much better. But yes, I think I agree with you completely in that example.
This computer coloring on the covers.
So was your statement that there is no such thing as a perfect thing, was that accepted by everyone? Did they say that, all right, it's wise and true?
Yeah, since I'm sort of the elder statesman in our circle,
they have to respect it.
I don't know if maybe they didn't dare to.
Well, that's sign of respect over there. But I mean, this reminds me of the fellow YouTuber FtLoC Comics. I think So FtLoC Comics has not only a very strong opinion, but he's got a couple of videos, I think, out there saying the European album format is the best
Yeah.
format in the world, etc. So whereas my point is always like, how can you say the best format and things like that? So I mean, we might have a discussion in which he has to defend that one format, and I'll take your position where I'm like, okay, then I'm going to bring out every other format because you have to defend one against the entire ocean out there. But yes, I think it's an interesting question because I think the broader question is there a particular format that generally is best, where I'm like, well, it depends on what you're talking about because some people might be more interested in storage. Some people, like there is this whole idea where people love things on the shelf that are the same size and the same. So they like the series because the top of the books all stay the same. Whereas I don't know, maybe I mean I like it as well, but I also like that sort of city Manhattan skyline sort of approach as well. For me, there's a beauty in having odd-sized books next to each other.
Absolutely.
Like that Adrian Tomina book is this big and the next one is this small. And if you want all the Tominas together, then they kind of end up that way. Or Chris Ware, where you'll have like these weird shapes. And sometimes I try to say, okay, my landscape books will be on this shelf and that shelf. But sometimes, like back there, like the more chaotic it is, the better like aesthetically speaking, I don't mind that either. So there's something like if you only had one format, everything would look the same on the shelves, and where's the fun in that?
Yeah, agree. But I actually agree on for the analog of comics assessment. Then, if I would have to choose one format, then it would be the European album format.
Right.
Thin hardcovers, and this format. It's a format I grew up with, and I still see a lot of benefits. What the artists can do with the page, and I've come to accept that the comic book format, the shrunken American book format, is also a possibility. It's
I think there are a number of things that have to do with production, and they have to do with distribution and their necessities. Even in the American comics, the golden age comics were, my Uncle Scrooge from a certain time are nice and fat compared to the later ones that got slimmer and slimmer. But the pedantic side of me will be, what do you mean by, give me the measurements? Because if you think about it in book sizes, which is the way I'll go, it's like, are you talking about a B5 size or an A3 size or things like that? But I like slim hardcovers. As a format, because I love hardcovers, but I also like a certain kind of slimness. So I tend to be more critical of omnibuses and big fat books, even though they do have this value for money. But that's an argument I get into a lot because people talk about it from that value for money point of view, but also I see that resale value kind of thing coming into it as well because of print runs, etc. But I mean, I like the idea of an omnibus, especially when it comes to long series, and saying that in these 4 volumes, I have the entire, 4-year run or 5-year run and things like that. But I think particularly if you read a lot of standalone graphic novels or, separated series kind of things, you think about them more as individual books. And I really like that idea of an individual book. So the slimmer is like, what can I read sitting on the sofa or even lying in bed? And after it starts breaking your wrist or falling on your face, it becomes more of a show. Again, just my opinion. It's not a thing, but I'm looking forward to a debate with Analog Comics, and I'll look for you in the comments section or the chat over there, where I'd like to talk to him about exactly what he means. One thing that I did want to talk to you about as far as YouTube is concerned is that one thing I noticed that we have in common with our channels is apparently we like playlists and we like making playlists, which is not something that everybody who does YouTube videos actually does, or they do it in a very perfunctory way. But one thing that I found on you've got a lot of playlists and they're interconnected, so they're not exclusive playlists, the same thing that shows up in sci-fi can show up in American or European. You've got this multi-meta tagging sort of approach to it. is there something, because I mean, I was very happy to find that, because that's kind of the way I like to do my playlists as well. Is there a particular approach that you do, or is it because you're thinking about when someone comes to my channel? Is it something to do with your way of thinking about comics, or is it about like a viewer that you're anticipating looking for stuff?
A bit both, I think. Primarily just helping me to see what I've done before, because it could happen that I really think I have to make a video about a comic, and I did it in FtLoC 200 and whatever. So, and I really love doing stuff with a plan, even if the plan maybe doesn't work. But that's the reason why I did these numbers. I initially, with my very first video, I thought, hey, you're a bit crazy, you're a bit mad to number it FtLoC 000. So that
3 digits.
After finally I reached 100 and much more, and I constantly tried to keep titles the same and some kind of consistency. So I love that the stuff can grow organically. And the beautiful thing with these playlist thing is that you can make a mess, do a video about this, do a video about that, and pretend that there's a plan, there's an order to it from the get-go, even if you didn't have one.
Yeah.
So, and another thing with the playlist actually is, and maybe it's a good idea if you want to continue with these interviews. Me and my YouTube friend Carsten, we did for the German channel, when we interviewed people, we had some other cartoonists as guests, and we said to them, hey, we would like you to make a playlist, just 5 songs, so we could talk about, not about comics for a moment, but then about the music. And music is such a good thing to relate to the people. And one had made actually funny German comics, but he was angry about a lot of stuff that is wrong right now politically here over in Germany. And all the anger found his way, he could express the anger in choosing titles, hip-hop titles, rap titles, Rage Against the Machine, like Rage Against the Machine was not in his list, but there was a lot of anger and frustration, and so we could talk about that, and it was a good starting point to get a different view on his comics. So I think this is kind of rewarding. Just to everyone has 5 favorite songs or titles on YouTube, and so that I thought you ask about that when you talk about playlist.
Well, I mean, that sounds very interesting. But no, I really like your say about it from that point, because yeah, to me also the playlist is kind of like shelving books, where you bought them in any order and it's all chaos. Yeah. But then when you put them on the shelves, you pretend like you had some sort of an idea, or it'll get filled in as, you know, so some book by Robert Crumb you bought in 1995, and then it's on the shelf but 10 years later, you'll have a couple of others, and you might move it to another shelf and you'll move it around. So I really do think of it that way. And I also think of it from that sort of approach of, if I'm curating and putting this together, how does it make sense? How does it make sense to me? Because you never know, you know, which the entry point for someone else would be. But it's like, can I always find something that I want to get to as an idea? And so therefore, I really like this, because I think if I come to a page like yours, like your YouTube channel, and I see your playlists, I get a sense of the breadth of what you have done, but also the kind of things that interest you, because you'll take it by, or you'll take it by creator, etc.
Yeah.
And one thing that I do want to talk about, and I don't know if a lot of people know this about, like, one of your playlists in which you have many, many videos are these you videos that you make, you know, and have continued to make over the years, which is just you exerting other comics YouTubers and sort of bringing them to note, where you make a little bit of an anthology video yourself of other notable comics YouTubers out there. And each of your videos have like dozens of people shown on
Yeah.
them, and you have dozens, literally dozens of such videos. I mean, it's a phenomenal playlist in which you have sort of archived and collected other comics channels. Probably the largest one that I've seen in one place, of saying here are all the different comics channels that are out there. I mean, I find that fascinating. I mean, not just generous, but also as an archival project, talking as we are as curators and things like that.
Yeah. It was a bit of curiosity about what is it, the stuff that we're doing here actually. So
Yeah.
sometimes I'm a bit of an art snob. I tried to be an artist one day in my past, and so I was really a bit into video art and stuff like this, where you have just projections of videos on. So I always thought about these videos. This would be actually a great installation. To have a huge room, just all these people talking about comics, maybe at the same time. And you can walk through this room and listen to them, different gender, different age, different nationalities, different quirks, strange people, nice, all nice people because they care about comics. But on the first glance, maybe strange looking crowd talking about something. Anyhow, so it was in the beginning, I really thought, hey, maybe I do some kind of, it's obviously never come to being and never will, but that was some kind of idea, and some stuff just does its own thing, and it's so easy. I watch these videos nevertheless, and then I record a bit and add them all together, and so it's a bit a monument of our YouTube.
It is. It really is. It's a phenomenal thing. I mean, like as an act of curation and of having put this together. And again, like most of the things on your channel, over a period of time. It's not a thing that was done for like 1 week and just put a whole bunch in there. And it's this thing that becomes this almost institution in some ways, which I think, again, is a very little seen or little acknowledged thing out there, where I'm not sure about you, but this is another question I had. Do you spend a lot of time on YouTube? Because I've talked to people who make YouTube videos but don't spend any time on YouTube other than that, and they might be busy with family or with work or with business, even if the YouTube is their main business, actually. At the same time, I also know other people and myself who do spend a lot of time on YouTube. And then there is this thing of where I spend time on YouTube, but I don't necessarily spend all my time on YouTube watching stuff about comics. So I'll have a handful of people and then something interesting will come up, but it's usually channels that I follow for the personality of the person rather than the comic itself that is being talked about. But then I watch a lot of YouTube videos on other topics, whether it's journalism or whether it's audio, video, and those kind of tutorials. Is this something that is important to you, like watching a lot of this YouTube and curating this and putting this together? Is that a natural offshoot of your watching, or is it a exercise that's a little different from how you normally are as far as YouTube watching is concerned?
Sometimes I have the notion that I have to check out new channels, and then it goes hand in hand with, oh, this looks interesting. Let's save it for later, and maybe I cut out. It's not so that it's impossible. I mean, in the meantime, there are more than 100, 200 channels on this list, I think. So I for the most part, I've lost track of the most of the channels, of course. And I have just a handful of channels that I watch, but still there are new interesting channels, like from comic people is one. I will put it in the next queue. And of course, if Noah Van Skyver does a new video, some kind of interview, the Kayfabe still have some interviews that I haven't watched. And yeah, and then there are a lot of German YouTubers actually that I really watch, and it's quite a bit that I watch just comic about comics, plus stuff like now I'm really for a while I was panicking about the American election. So, and now that it seems to turn a bit into the right direction, I dare to watch a lot of Stephen Colbert's late night show, which is hilarious and just a joy to watch them enjoying themselves and having fun. That
it's not like a rabbit hole, once you start going into it. I mean, we can start with the comedy, but then it can lead to something else and lead to something else. And YouTube is also very good at like, oh, since you watched one video of that, you must watch 15 other videos, and you're like, all right, I'll keep going into that. But yeah, I think I say that YouTube is a thing that I really enjoy because of that mixture of the homegrown as well as the professional. In that way, I think about it as almost like the World Series of poker or something like that, where you can be an amateur and you can play against the number one champion, etc. You can't do that at Wimbledon or the World Cup of football or something like that. You can't do that, but you can on YouTube. You can kind of like be side by side. So I'm I'm very thankful to have people like you alongside all of the big fancy etc, because this is the kind of YouTube that has always been very attractive to me and has been very inspiring to me. I'm realizing that we've been talking for a long time now, but I've had such a good time that this is the first time I looked at what time it is. But it's been a great conversation. But I hope that I know that you're doing more on your German channel these days, and the English channel has a little less. But I think on behalf of the people who can only watch,
I will continue with my English channel for sure.
Yeah, but it's also great to see you trying and branching out into different things. As you said, in some ways you're an elder statesman there, but also this whole idea of like where you feel you should be checking out other YouTubers who are coming up, and you should be keeping yourself informed. I think you've got that role, in many different ways. So thank you so much for taking the time. And I hope that, one day you'll come back and we can have other chats, because I think we're only scratching the surface of what things we could talk about. But thank you so much, Milan, for taking the time for this conversation. It was fantastic having you on.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Thank you.
It was nice. Very nice.